are places in the brain that language cannot reach, rooms where words have no keys. Henry Miller lived in one of those rooms for 3 years before anyone found the door. He was 78. His wife still visited. His hands still moved. But his voice had gone somewhere memory could not follow, until one afternoon a nurse pressed play on an old cassette, and something older than speech began to stir. This is not a story about forgetting. It is about what remains when everything else is gone. Now, let's find out what really happened.
The hallway smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. Margaret Miller had been walking it every Tuesday and Friday for 2 years. She knew the third tile from the window was cracked. She knew the water cooler hummed in A-flat. She knew her husband would not know her today. Henry sat in the blue chair by the window. His hair was combed. His hands rested on his knees. His eyes tracked the light, but not her face. She sat down beside him. She touched his hand. He did not pull away, but he did not hold on either. It was like touching a mannequin that breathed. The room was warm. Dust moved slowly through the angled sun. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured. Margaret opened her purse and pulled out a photo. It was from their wedding, 46 years ago. She placed it on his lap. Henry looked at it. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. No recognition, no smile, just the photo and the light and the sound of his breathing. She stayed for an hour. She talked about the garden, about their daughter in Portland, about the cat that kept climbing into the neighbor's garage. Henry blinked. He shifted his weight. He said nothing. When she left, she touched his shoulder. He did not turn. Lucy Tran was 26 and had been a nurse for 3 years. She liked the patients no one else wanted to sit with, the quiet ones, the ones who stared. She found Henry interesting, not because he spoke, but because his fingers moved. She noticed it one afternoon while changing his water glass. His right hand twitched, just slightly. 4 taps on the armrest. Pause. 4 more taps. She watched. It happened again. Rhythmic. Deliberate. She asked the other nurses. No one had noticed. She checked his file. Former church organist. 40 years at St. Matthew's Lutheran. Played every Sunday until the diagnosis. She wondered if the tapping meant something. The next day, she brought a small Bluetooth speaker. She did not tell anyone. She sat beside Henry and played Bach. Prelude in C major. A beginner's piece. Clean and simple. Henry's hand stopped tapping. His head tilted. Just barely. His eyes stayed on the window. But something in his posture changed. She turned the volume up. His right hand lifted. His fingers spread. He was playing. On air. On nothing. But his wrist moved the way an organist's wrist moves. Curved. Controlled. The thumb tucked under for the scale. Lucy watched. Her throat tightened. She let the piece finish. When it ended, Henry's hand dropped back to his lap. His face showed nothing, but his breathing had slowed. She played 3 more pieces that day. Each time his fingers moved. Each time the rhythm matched. She did not know what it meant, but she knew it mattered. Dr. Raymond Cole had been a neurologist for 31 years. He did not believe in miracles. He believed in circuits and synapses and measurable electrical activity, but he also believed in paying attention. When Lucy showed him the video she had taken, he watched it 4 times. Henry's fingers moved in time with the recording. His thumb crossed under on the 3rd beat. His pinky lifted on the octave jump. These were not random spasms. These were learned motor sequences. He pulled Henry's brain scans. The hippocampus was severely atrophied. The language centers were nearly dark. But the motor cortex, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, those areas still showed activity. Music was stored differently than words. It lived in older, deeper structures. Structures that Alzheimer's touched last. He called Margaret. He asked her to bring recordings. Anything Henry had played. Anything he had loved. She brought a shoebox. Inside were 12 cassette tapes, labeled in Henry's handwriting. Christmas Eve, 1987. Easter, 1991. Sunday service, September 1998. She had not listened to them in years. Dr. Cole picked one at random. He loaded it into an old cassette player Lucy had found in the storage closet. The sound was thin and crackling. Organ music. Slow. Hymnal. The acoustics suggested a large room. Margaret sat very still. Her hands were in her lap. Her eyes were closed. Henry sat across from her. He did not look at the speaker. He looked at the floor, but his right hand began to move, slowly, the fingers curling, the wrist rotating. He was playing again. Dr. Cole made notes. Margaret cried quietly. The tape played for 11 minutes. When it ended, Henry's hand stopped. He looked up. His eyes found Margaret's face. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, something passed between them. Not recognition, not quite, but connection. A flicker of the man she married. Then it faded. His gaze drifted back to the window. Doctor. Cole leaned forward. He spoke gently. Henry, can you hear me? Henry. No response. He tried again. Henry, do you remember this music? Nothing. But when Dr. Cole hummed the opening bars of the hymn, Henry's head turned. Just slightly. Just enough. Margaret leaned in. She hummed with him, softly. 4 notes. Rising. Henry's mouth moved. No sound came out, but the shape was right. Dr. Cole wrote in his notes, subject responds to melodic cues. Motor memory intact. Emotional recognition possible. Recommend continued auditory engagement. Lucy began playing music for Henry every afternoon. She kept a log. She noted which pieces made his fingers move, which ones made him tilt his head, which ones made his breathing change. She learned that he responded most to hymns, specifically to slower hymns in minor keys. She learned that complex Bach fugues made his left hand twitch, but his right hand stayed still. She learned that when she played recordings of his own performances, his eyes would close. One Thursday, she played Amazing Grace. It was not Henry's recording. It was a choir version, soprano and alto. No organ. Henry's lips moved. No sound, but the movement matched the melody. Lucy leaned closer. She turned the volume down. She watched his mouth. He was singing, silently. Perfectly in time. She called Dr. Cole. She called Margaret. When they arrived, she played it again. Henry's eyes stayed open this time. His mouth moved. His right hand lifted. And then, barely audible, a sound. A hum. Unstable. Fragile, but unmistakably intentional. Margaret covered her mouth. Dr. Cole adjusted his glasses. Lucy played the verse again. This time, Henry hummed louder. The pitch wavered, but the rhythm held. Margaret reached for his hand. She squeezed it. He did not squeeze back, but he did not let go. That night, Margaret sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She just sat. The sky was dark. The streetlights buzzed. She thought about the way Henry used to hum while he cooked, the way he tapped rhythms on the steering wheel, the way music had always been his first language. She started the car. She drove home. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table and opened the shoebox again. She picked a tape at random and pressed play. It was a recording from 1993, a funeral service. The hymn was Be Still My Soul. Henry's playing was steady and soft. She remembered that day. She had sat in the third pew. She had watched his hands move across the keys. She closed her eyes. She hummed along, and for a moment, she felt him beside her. The disease had taken his words. It had taken his memory. It had taken his face and his name and the shape of 46 years. But it had not taken this? Not yet. Margaret brought more tapes the following week. She labeled them by year and occasion. She asked Lucy to try them in order, to see if chronology mattered. It did not. Henry responded the same whether the recording was from 1985 or 2003. What mattered was the hymn. What mattered was whether he had played it often. Lucy tested this theory. She played a recording of Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. Henry's hands stayed still. She played A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. His fingers twitched. She played it again. This time, his whole hand lifted. She made a list. The hymns that moved him. The hymns that didn't. She showed it to Dr. Cole. He studied it. He cross-referenced it with Margaret's notes. A pattern emerged. The hymns Henry had played most. Frequently, Those he had performed at least 50 times triggered the strongest motor responses. The others did not. This was not random. This was consolidation. Decades of repetition had carved these melodies into his brain, so deeply that even severe neurodegeneration could not erase them. Dr. Cole explained this to Margaret. She nodded. She understood. But what she really wanted to know was simpler. Can he come back? Can this bring him back? Dr. Cole chose his words carefully. Music can activate pathways that language cannot. It can evoke emotion, trigger memory fragments, even restore temporary motor function, but it cannot reverse the disease. It cannot rebuild what has been lost. Margaret looked at him. So what can it do? It can give him moments. It can give you both moments. She thought about this. She asked, how many moments? As many as the music allows. She accepted this. It was more than she had yesterday. That afternoon, Lucy played a new recording. It was Henry's performance of Amazing Grace from 1989. The tape was slightly warped. The sound wobbled in places, but the melody was clear. Henry's right hand rose immediately. His fingers moved faster this time, more confident. He was not just mimicking, he was remembering. Lucy watched his face. His eyes were half closed. His breathing was even. She wondered what he was seeing. If he was back in the church, if he could feel the pedals under his feet, if he could hear the congregation singing behind him. She let the hymn play twice. On the second repetition, Henry's left hand joined. Both hands now, moving independently. The left marking the bass line, the right tracing the melody. Margaret arrived near the end. She stood in the doorway. She did not interrupt. She just watched. When the tape ended, Henry's hands dropped. He opened his eyes. He looked at Margaret, and this time he smiled. It was small. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was real. Margaret stepped into the room. She sat beside him. She took his hand. She said his name. Henry. He did not respond. She said it again. Henry. It's Margaret. Nothing. She hummed the first line of Amazing Grace. Softly. Just the melody. Henry's fingers twitched. His mouth moved. He hummed with her. Off key. Halting. But together, they sat like that for 10 minutes. Humming. Holding hands. Not speaking. Not needing to. Lucy stepped out. She closed the door quietly. She stood in the hallway and wiped her eyes. Dr. Cole updated his notes. Patient exhibits sustained melodic recognition. Emotional bonding observed during shared musical engagement. Motor sequencing remains consistent. Recommend increased frequency of auditory interaction. Potential for short-term memory cue integration. He spoke with the care team. He suggested daily music sessions, 30 minutes minimum, preferably with familiar voices, preferably with physical contact. The staff agreed. They assigned Lucy as primary coordinator. She did not mind. She had already been doing it anyway. The sessions became routine. Every day at 2 o'clock, Lucy would wheel Henry into the small activity room. She would set up the speaker. She would play a hymn. Sometimes Margaret was there. Sometimes she was not. But Henry responded either way. His motor responses grew stronger. By the third week, he was tapping both hands on the armrests. By the fourth week, he was moving his feet. Lucy noticed something else. On days when they played music, Henry ate more at dinner. He made eye contact more often. He seemed, in some small way, more present. She documented this. Dr. Cole reviewed it. He was not surprised. Music engages the limbic system. The limbic system regulates mood, motivation, appetite. If music was reaching Henry's emotional core, it made sense that other functions would improve. But there were limits. Henry still could not speak. He still did not recognize faces without musical context. He still required full-time care. The music was not a cure. It was a bridge. Temporary, fragile, but real. One afternoon in late spring, Margaret brought a harmonica. It had been Henry's. He used to play it on camping trips. Simple melodies, folk songs, nothing fancy. She handed it to Lucy. She asked her to try. Lucy held it up to Henry's lips. She played a single note, C, clear and bright. Henry's eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. Lucy played another note, E, then G. Henry leaned forward. His lips touched the harmonica. Lucy pulled back, letting him hold it. He brought it to his mouth. He blew. The sound was weak, breathy, but it was a note, a real note. Margaret's hand went to her chest. Lucy grinned. Henry blew again. Another note. Then another. Not a melody, just sound, just breath and metal and intention. He played for maybe 30 seconds. Then he stopped. He lowered the harmonica. He looked at Margaret. She took the harmonica from his hand. She played the first line of "You Are My Sunshine." Slowly, carefully. Henry watched her fingers. He watched her mouth. And then, very softly, he hummed along. They passed the harmonica back and forth. She would play a line. He would hum it. She would play another. He would hum again. It was not conversation, but it was communication. Lucy filmed it on her phone. She sent it to Dr. Cole. He watched it 3 times. He made more notes. He scheduled a case study presentation. Henry was becoming medically significant. But to Margaret, he was just becoming Henry again. In pieces, in moments, in melodies. That night, she sat in the garden. The tomatoes were coming in. The roses needed pruning. She thought about the harmonica, about the way his eyes had brightened, about the way he had looked at her when he played. She thought about all the years they had spent in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because words had stopped being necessary. Music had always been enough, and now, when words were gone entirely, music was all they had left. She did not know how long it would last. Dr. Cole had been clear about that. The disease would progress. The windows would close. The moments would become fewer. But for now, there were still moments, and she would take every single one. End of Part 2. Part 3. Margaret started bringing sheet music. Not for Henry to read, he could not process written symbols anymore. But for herself. She wanted to remember which hymns he had loved, which verses he had played differently, which transitions he had always struggled with. She spread the sheets across the small table in the activity room. Lucy sat beside her. Together, they mapped out a rotation. Monday, Amazing Grace. Tuesday, Be Still My Soul. Wednesday, A Mighty Fortress. Thursday, Abide With Me. Friday, Great is Thy Faithfulness. They would repeat the cycle. Week after week. Consistency, Dr. Cole said, would reinforce the neural pathways. Repetition would keep the door open. Margaret asked, for how long? Dr. Cole did not answer immediately. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at his notes. Then he said, as long as the music holds him. That was enough. The first Monday of the new schedule, Margaret arrived at 1:30. She wanted to be there early. She wanted to set the room. She brought a small vase of flowers, daisies. Henry used to grow them in the backyard. Lucy helped her arrange the chairs. They placed Henry near the window. The afternoon light came in low and golden. It made the room feel softer. At 2 o'clock, Lucy pressed play. Amazing Grace, Henry's own recording. The one from 1989. Henry's hands rose immediately. His fingers found the rhythm. His head tilted slightly to the left, the way it always did when he played in the church. Margaret watched. She had seen this before, but today felt different. Today, she was not just watching. She was participating. She began to hum, quietly at first, then louder. She matched the melody. She followed the phrasing. She breathed where Henry would have breathed. Henry turned his head. He looked at her. His fingers kept moving, but his eyes stayed on her face. She kept humming. She did not stop. She did not look away. Henry's mouth opened. A sound came out, soft, thin, but shaped. He was humming with her. They hummed together. The recording played in the background, but they were not following it anymore. They were following each other. When the hymn ended, they both stopped. The room was quiet. The flowers swayed slightly in the breeze from the open window. Margaret reached for his hand. He let her take it. She said, I miss you. He did not respond, but his thumb moved against her palm. Just once, a small press. She held on. Lucy watched from the doorway. She had seen many families navigate dementia. She had seen grief in 1,000 forms. But this was different. This was not goodbye. This was still love. She stepped back into the hallway. She let them sit. The following week, Margaret tried something new. She brought a small keyboard, battery-powered, 36 keys. She set it on a tray table in front of Henry. She was not sure if he would understand. She was not sure if his hands could still manage it. But she had to try. Lucy pressed play. A mighty fortress. Henry's hands lifted. They hovered over the keys. Margaret guided his right hand down. His fingers touched the plastic. The sound was bright and electronic. Not like the organ, but close enough. Henry pressed a key, then another. His fingers found C, then E, then G. A triad. Simple. Foundational. He played it again, then again. His left hand joined. The bass note, F, steady and low. Margaret pulled her hands back. She let him go. He continued, slowly, haltingly, but deliberately. He was not playing the hymn. He was playing fragments, pieces of muscle memory surfacing in no particular order. But it was music. It was intentional sound. Lucy recorded it. Dr. Cole reviewed the footage that evening. He noted the precision of the fingerings, the curve of the wrists, the way Henry's left foot tapped in time. He called Margaret. He said, "This is remarkable. His procedural memory is accessing stored sequences without cognitive input. He is playing without thinking." Margaret said, "He always played without thinking. That is how he played best." Doctor. Cole paused. Then he said, "You are right." They continued the keyboard sessions every afternoon. 30 minutes. Sometimes Henry played for 5 minutes. Sometimes for 20. Sometimes he just rested his hands on the keys and listened. Margaret learned to follow his lead. If he played, she played with him. If he stopped, she stopped. She did not push. She did not correct. She just stayed beside him. One Thursday, Henry played the opening phrase of Abide With Me. It was clear. It was complete. 8 notes. Perfect. Margaret froze. She looked at Lucy. Lucy nodded. Henry played it again. Same phrase. Same notes. Then he stopped. His hands dropped. Margaret leaned in. She sang the first line, softly. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. Henry's lips moved. No sound. But the shape was right. She sang the second line. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. Henry hummed. Quietly. But in tune. She kept singing. He kept humming. They made it through the first verse. Then the second. By the third verse, his humming was louder. Stronger. When they finished, Margaret was crying. Henry's eyes were closed. His breathing was even. Lucy said, "He remembers." Margaret shook her head. She wiped her face. She said, "He never forgot." That night, Margaret could not sleep. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about all the Sundays she had sat in the third pew, all the times she had watched Henry's hands move across the keys, all the hymns she had sung without really hearing them. She thought about the way music had been the background of their marriage, always there, always steady. She had taken it for granted. She got out of bed. She went to the piano in the living room. It had not been tuned in 3 years. She sat down. She played the opening of Amazing Grace. The notes were slightly flat. The action was stiff. But the melody was there. She played it through once, then again, then a third time. She thought about Henry's hands on the keyboard, about the way his fingers remembered what his mind could not. She thought about love, about how it lived in the body, in rhythm, in breath, in the space between two people humming the same song. She closed the piano. She went back to bed. She slept. The next morning, she called the church. She spoke to Pastor Harmon. She asked if they still had Henry's organ. They did. It had not been played in 3 years. She asked if she could bring Henry to see it. Pastor Harmon said yes. Dr. Cole was hesitant. Moving Henry out of the facility was a risk. His condition was fragile. His stamina was limited. There were liability concerns. But Margaret was insistent. She said he gave 40 years to that church. He deserves to see it again. Dr. Cole reviewed Henry's vitals. His blood pressure was stable. His mobility was adequate with assistance. There was no acute medical reason to prevent the visit. He agreed, but he set conditions. Lucy would accompany them. The visit would be limited to 1 hour. They would bring a wheelchair. If Henry showed any signs of distress, they would leave immediately. Margaret accepted. She signed the forms. She scheduled the visit for the following Sunday. The morning was cool and bright. Margaret dressed Henry in his gray cardigan, the one he used to wear to church. It was too big for him now. He had lost weight, but she buttoned it anyway. Lucy helped him into the wheelchair. They loaded him into Margaret's sedan. The drive took 12 minutes. Henry stared out the window. He did not speak. He did not react to the passing streets, but his hands rested calmly in his lap. When they pulled into the church parking lot, Margaret turned off the engine. She sat for a moment. She looked at the building. Red brick, white trim, tall stained glass windows along the side. It looked exactly the same. She got out. She opened the back door. She leaned in close to Henry. She said, "We are here. We are at St. Matthew's." Henry did not respond. She wheeled him up the ramp. Pastor Harmon met them at the door. He smiled. He shook Margaret's hand. He looked at Henry. He said, "Welcome home, Henry." Henry stared past him. They went inside. The sanctuary was empty. The pews were polished. The light came through the windows in soft colors. Blue, gold, green. Margaret wheeled Henry down the center aisle. Slowly. She wanted him to see it, to feel it, to remember. They stopped in front of the organ. It was elevated on a small platform. The console was covered with a cloth. The pipes rose behind it, tall and silent. Pastor Harmon removed the cloth. Dust scattered in the light. The keys were yellowed. The stops were labeled in faded ink, but it was intact. Margaret looked at Henry. His eyes were on the organ. His hands gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. She said, "Do you want to try?" He did not answer, but his fingers moved. Lucy helped him stand. Pastor Harmon brought the wheelchair closer. They positioned Henry on the bench. His feet found the pedals instinctively. Margaret sat beside him. She turned on the console. The organ hummed to life, a low, vibrating sound. The pipes filled with air. She played a single note, middle C. It echoed through the sanctuary. Henry's right hand lifted. He placed it on the keys. He pressed down. The sound was deep and full, not like the plastic keyboard. This was real. He played another note, then another. His left hand joined. He was playing a scale. Slowly, carefully, but correctly. Margaret pulled her hands back. She let him continue. Henry played for 2 minutes, maybe 3. He did not play a hymn. He did not play a melody. He just played notes, chords, fragments. But his posture was different. His back was straight. His shoulders were square. He looked like himself. Lucy stood at the back of the sanctuary. She watched the light move across the pews. She watched Henry's hands on the keys. She thought about all the Sundays this room had been filled with sound, all the people who had sat here and listened, all the moments Henry had given them. Margaret leaned close to Henry. She hummed the first line of Amazing Grace. Henry stopped playing. He turned his head. He looked at her. She kept humming. He pressed the keys. The opening chord, the one he had played 1,000 times. She sang softly, just the first line. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Henry played the next chord, then the next. He was following her, or she was following him. It did not matter. They moved through the first verse together. Her voice, his hands, the organ pipes carrying the sound up into the rafters. When they finished, the sanctuary was quiet again. Margaret rested her hand on Henry's shoulder. He did not turn, but he did not pull away. Pastor Harmon stepped forward. He said, "That was beautiful." Margaret nodded. She could not speak. They sat for a few more minutes. Henry's hands stayed on the keys. He did not play. He just rested them there, feeling the wood, the ivory, the weight. Lucy checked her watch. They had been there 45 minutes. She said gently, "We should go soon." Margaret agreed. She helped Henry stand. They guided him back into the wheelchair. He did not resist, but as they turned to leave, his hand reached out. He touched the organ console, just once, his fingers tracing the edge. Margaret stopped. She let him hold it. She said, "We can come back. If you want, we can come back." Henry's hand dropped. He looked at the floor. They wheeled him down the aisle, past the pews, past the windows, out into the daylight. On the drive home, Henry fell asleep. His head rested against the window. His breathing was slow and even. Margaret watched him in the rearview mirror. She thought about the way his hands had looked on the keys, the way his back had straightened, the way, for just a few minutes, he had been whole. Lucy said, "That was good for him." Margaret nodded. She said, "It was good for me too." When they arrived back at the facility, Henry woke. He looked confused. He looked at Margaret. He did not recognize her. She helped him out of the car. She walked him inside. She said, "You played today. You played the organ. Do you remember?" He did not answer. She said, "You were beautiful." He looked at her. His expression was blank, but his right hand lifted. 4 taps on his thigh. Steady, even. The rhythm of amazing grace. She held his hand. She walked him to his room. She helped him into his chair. She sat with him until dinner. That night, Dr. Cole called. He asked how it went. Margaret told him everything. The organ, the hymn, the light, the way Henry had touched the console. Dr. Cole listened. When she finished, he said, "You gave him a gift today." She said, "He gave me one too." Dr. Cole made notes. He documented the visit. He noted the sustained motor engagement, the apparent emotional response, the brief moment of possible recognition. But what he wrote in the margin, in his own handwriting, was this: "Music is memory made audible." He underlined it twice. The visit to the church changed something. Not in Henry's diagnosis, not in his prognosis, but in the way Margaret approached his care. She stopped asking if he remembered her. She stopped showing him photos. She stopped trying to remind him of the past. Instead, she brought music. Every visit, every day. Sometimes it was hymns. Sometimes it was folk songs. Sometimes it was just her voice, humming quietly while she helped him eat. Henry responded more consistently now. His hands moved more often. His eyes tracked her face more reliably. He still did not speak, but his presence felt closer. Lucy noticed it too. She said, "He is more alert, more engaged." Dr. Cole reviewed the logs. He agreed. He said, "The repeated auditory stimulation is reinforcing active neural pathways. His brain is compensating." Margaret did not care about the science. She cared that when she hummed, Henry looked at her. She cared that when she held his hand, his thumb pressed back. One afternoon, she brought a recording she had not played before. It was from Christmas Eve 1995. Henry had played Silent Night as a postlude. The church had been dark except for candles. The congregation had filed out slowly, singing softly. She had recorded it on a small handheld device. The quality was poor. The sound was muffled. But you could hear the organ. You could hear Henry's touch on the keys. She played it for him. Henry's eyes closed. His head tilted back slightly. His breathing slowed. Margaret watched. She wondered what he was seeing. If he could see the candles, if he could feel the cold December air, if he could hear the voices. When the recording ended, Henry's eyes opened. He looked at her, and he smiled. It was not a flicker. It was not a reflex. It was a smile. Full, warm, unmistakable. Margaret's breath caught. She said, "Henry?" He kept smiling. She said, "Do you know me?" The smile faded. His gaze drifted. But for a moment, just a moment, he had been there. She played the recording again and again. Each time, Henry's expression softened. Each time, he seemed to return. Lucy filmed one of the sessions. She showed it to Dr. Cole. He watched it carefully. He paused it at the moment Henry smiled. He studied his face. He said, "This is not procedural memory. This is emotional memory." He is feeling something. He is connecting the sound to an emotion. And that emotion is tied to you. Margaret asked, "Does that mean he remembers me?" Dr. Cole hesitated. Then he said, "It means he feels you." That was enough. The weeks continued. The music sessions became the center of Henry's day. Everything else, meals, medication, physical therapy, revolved around 2 o'clock. Margaret rearranged her schedule. She came every day now. She brought new recordings. She sang more. She hummed more. She filled the room with sound. One afternoon, she tried something different. She did not bring a recording. She did not bring the keyboard. She just sat beside Henry and sang, a cappella, no accompaniment, just her voice. She sang Amazing Grace, slowly, clearly. She watched his face. Henry's hands stayed still, but his lips moved, silently, matching her words. She kept singing, verse after verse. By the third verse, Henry was humming, quietly, but audibly. By the fourth verse, they were singing together. His voice was thin and unsteady, but it was there. Margaret's throat tightened. She kept going. She sang all 6 verses. Henry hummed through all of them. When they finished, she took his hand. She said, "I love you." He did not say it back, but his hand squeezed hers. Lucy stood outside the door. She had stopped documenting these moments. They were too personal, too sacred. She just let them happen. Dr. Cole received her final report that week. He read it twice. He made notes. He wrote, "Patient demonstrates sustained capacity for emotional and procedural recall via musical engagement. Caregiver bond remains intact despite severe cognitive decline. Music functions as persistent relational bridge." He closed the file. He thought about all the patients he had treated over 3 decades, all the families he had counseled, all the losses he had witnessed. He thought about Henry and Margaret, about the way they sat together, the way they hummed together, the way love had found a language when words were gone. He did not write that in the report, but he thought it. That Sunday, Margaret brought Henry back to the church. It was easier this time. He recognized the building, or at least he recognized the feeling of the building. They went inside. Pastor Harmon was waiting. He had opened the organ console. He had dusted the keys. Margaret wheeled Henry to the bench. She helped him sit. This time, she did not play first. She just turned on the console. She waited. Henry's hands found the keys. He pressed middle C, then E, then G, the same triad he had played 2 weeks ago. But this time, he kept going. He played the opening phrase of Amazing Grace, complete, clear, intentional. Margaret sat beside him. She did not sing. She just listened. Henry played through the first verse. His left hand added the bass line. His right hand carried the melody. The tempo was slow. The notes were sometimes hesitant, but the structure was there. When he finished, he stopped. His hands rested on the keys. He looked at them, at his own fingers, as if seeing them for the first time. Margaret touched his shoulder. She said, "That was perfect." Henry turned his head. He looked at her. His eyes were wet. She said, "You are still here. You are still you." He did not speak, but he leaned into her, just slightly, just enough. They sat like that for a long time. The light moved across the sanctuary floor. The organ hummed quietly. Outside, the world continued. But in this room, time had stopped. Lucy took a photo. Just one. Henry at the organ. Margaret beside him. The stained glass casting colors across their faces. She did not share it. She kept it on her phone. A private reminder that some things cannot be taken. Some things remain. Pastor Harmon stood at the back of the sanctuary. He had been a pastor for 38 years. He had officiated hundreds of weddings, hundreds of funerals. He had seen faith in many forms. But this, he thought, was the purest form he had ever witnessed. 2 people, 1 song, and the refusal to let go. When they left, Henry was tired. Margaret wheeled him to the car. She buckled him in. She drove him back. He slept the whole way. That night, Margaret sat in her kitchen. She made tea. She looked at the calendar. It was June. 3 years since the diagnosis. 2 years since Henry had stopped speaking. She thought about all the moments they had lost, all the conversations they would never have, all the plans they would never complete. But she also thought about the moments they had found, the humming, the hymns, the way his hand pressed hers, the way he smiled when the music played. She thought about love, about how it adapts, how it survives, how it finds new languages when the old ones fail. She finished her tea. She went to bed. She dreamed of organ music. Summer arrived. The trees outside the facility grew dense with leaves. The afternoons were long and warm. Margaret kept coming. Every day, 2 o'clock. Henry's condition did not improve. Dr. Cole had been clear about that. The disease was progressive. The decline was inevitable. But the music kept working. For now. Some days, Henry played the keyboard for 20 minutes. Other days, he only managed a few notes. Some days, he hummed along. Other days, he just listened. Margaret learned not to expect consistency. She learned to meet him wherever he was. One afternoon in late July, Henry did not respond to the music at all. Margaret played Amazing Grace. Nothing. She played A Mighty Fortress. Nothing. She hummed. She sang. She held his hand. He stared at the window. His face was blank. His hands were still. Lucy said gently, "Maybe he needs rest today." Margaret nodded, but she did not leave. She just sat. She held his hand. She did not play music. She did not hum. She just stayed. After 30 minutes, Henry's thumb moved. Just once, against her palm. She looked at him. He was still staring at the window, but his thumb moved again. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. No music, no memory, just touch, just presence. She stayed for another hour. When she left, she kissed his forehead. She said, "I will see you tomorrow." He did not respond, but his eyes followed her to the door. Dr. Cole met with Margaret the following week. He reviewed Henry's latest scans. The degeneration had progressed. The areas of the brain responsible for motor planning were beginning to fade. He said, "The music may stop working soon. His ability to access those memories is diminishing." Margaret asked, "How long?" He said, "Weeks, maybe months. There is no way to know." She asked, "Will he forget the music too?" He said, "Eventually." "Yes." She nodded. She thanked him. She left. That afternoon, she played every hymn Henry had ever loved, one after another, for 2 hours. She played his recordings. She sang. She hummed. She filled the room with sound. Henry responded to some, not to others. His hands moved occasionally. His lips shaped words occasionally. But it was less. It was fading. When she finished, she sat beside him. She said, "I know you are tired. I know this is hard. But I am not going anywhere. I will be here. Every day, as long as you need me." Henry's head turned. Just slightly. He looked at her. His eyes were cloudy, but something in them was still soft. She held his hand. She did not let go. The following month, Henry stopped playing the keyboard. His hands no longer responded to the music. They stayed in his lap, still, heavy. Margaret kept bringing the recordings. She kept singing, but she knew, she could feel it. The door was closing. One afternoon in early September, she played Silent Night, the Christmas recording from 1995. Henry's eyes closed. His breathing slowed, but his hands did not move. She sang along, softly. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. When she finished, Henry's eyes opened. He looked at her, and very quietly, he hummed 4 notes. 4 notes, the beginning of the melody. Fragile, barely audible, but there. Margaret stopped breathing. She leaned closer. She said, "Again, please." Henry did not respond. She sang the line again. Silent night, holy night. Henry hummed 4 notes, the same 4 notes. She sang it a 3rd time. He hummed again. Lucy stood in the doorway. Tears streamed down her face. Margaret kept singing. Henry kept humming. 4 notes, over and over, until his voice gave out. When he stopped, Margaret kissed his hand. She said, "Thank you. Thank you for staying." Henry's eyes closed. He did not open them again that day. Dr. Cole updated his notes one final time. He wrote, "Patient's capacity for musical engagement has diminished significantly. Occasional melodic fragments remain. Emotional connection with primary caregiver persists. Prognosis remains terminal. Estimated time months." He closed the file. He sat at his desk. He thought about the limits of medicine, about what could be measured and what could not. He thought about Henry and Margaret, about the way they had fought, not against the disease. You could not fight the disease, but for each other, for the space between them, for the sound that kept them tethered. He thought about what he had learned. That memory was not one thing. It was many things. And some forms of memory lived deeper than thought, deeper than language, deep enough that even Alzheimer's could not reach them all. He thought about love, about how it was a form of memory too, written in the body, in rhythm, in the reflex to reach for someone even when you no longer knew their name. He wrote one final note in the margin. The music did not save him, but it let him leave slowly. Margaret continued her visits every day. 2 o'clock. She no longer brought recordings. She no longer brought the keyboard. She just brought herself. She sat beside Henry. She held his hand. She hummed quietly. Sometimes he responded. Sometimes he did not. It no longer mattered. One afternoon in late October, Henry's breathing changed. It became shallow, irregular. The nurse called Margaret. She came immediately. She sat beside him. She took his hand. She leaned close. She hummed Amazing Grace, softly, slowly, all 6 verses. Henry's eyes stayed closed, but his fingers moved. Just barely, 4 taps against her palm. Steady, even. In time, she kept humming. His fingers kept tapping. 4 beats, the rhythm of the hymn, the rhythm of 40 years. When she finished, his hand went still. His breathing slowed, and then it stopped. Margaret sat with him for a long time. She did not call the nurse. She did not move. She just held his hand and hummed. The light from the window turned gold, then orange, then gray. When she finally stood, she kissed his forehead. She said, "I will see you again. Somewhere. Somehow." She walked to the door. She looked back once. Henry's face was peaceful. His hands rested on his chest. He looked, she thought, like a man who had just finished playing. The funeral was small, just family, a few friends from the church. Pastor Harmon spoke. He talked about Henry's dedication, his kindness, his gift. Margaret asked if she could play. Pastor Harmon said yes. She sat at the organ, the same organ Henry had played for 40 years. She turned on the console. She placed her hands on the keys. She played Amazing Grace, slowly, carefully, the way Henry had taught her 30 years ago. Her hands shook, her eyes blurred, but she played all 6 verses. When she finished, the sanctuary was silent. She closed the console. She stood. She walked back to her seat. Someone asked if she was all right. She said yes, and she meant it. That night, she sat in her kitchen. She made tea. She looked at the calendar. October 24th. 3 years and 7 months since the diagnosis. She thought about all the things the disease had taken. His words, his memory, his independence, his future. But she also thought about what it had not taken. The rhythm, the music, the way his hand had moved against hers, the way he had smiled when she sang, the way, even at the end, he had tapped 4 beats in time. She thought about love, about how it was not one thing, it was many things. And some of those things could not be destroyed. Not by disease, not by death, not by time. She finished her tea. She went to the piano. She opened the lid. She played Amazing Grace. Once, then again, then a third time, and somewhere, in a place beyond words, beyond memory, beyond even music, she felt him beside her. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a rhythm, steady, even unbreakable. She closed the piano. She went to bed. She dreamed of stained glass, light, and the sound of organ pipes filling a quiet room. And in the dream, Henry was playing. His hands moved across the keys. His back was straight. His face was calm. And when he turned to look at her, he smiled.